Welcome, Kala. Audio check. That sounds good, Kala. I'll be with you in a few minutes. Wait for a few more people to show up. Might want to get a drink or a snack or something like that. Welcome, Nemo. I think we shall begin. Now that we have a minimum audience. I think my pill's there for a minute, so I step away. But we shall now begin. If everybody's ready. If Cat ready, or Nemo's ready, or somebody's ready. Okay, Calla, I shall begin. So we now begin on the 12th of September, 2022, and this is our last day in London, and we're going to go north. If you look on the map here, to Penrith in the north of England. A whole bunch of sites up there I was interested in, and that's within 20 miles, if you can see that, of the Scottish border. And this is a part of England which feels to me very much like Scotland in many ways. So if we look on the national map, Google Maps here, we go from London down here, and we're going to take a 4-hour train ride um, up to Penrith, up here. Now Penrith is the main, well, maybe I don't say main city. It's usually considered like the gateway city, if you want to put it that way, to what's called the Lake District. And Lake District is within this part of England, which is called Cumbria, not to be confused with Cambria, which is central Wales, but Cumbria, England, is up here, a little peninsula that sticks out into the Irish Sea. Um, and as you go up the main train line, you get to Penrith here, and that gives you access to all this area. And this is the highest mountains in England. There are a couple higher mountains in Scotland. And there's a bunch of alpine lakes. It's very beautiful up here. This is also the UK's largest and first, chronologically, national park. Encompasses more than half of Cumbria, and you're so Penrith is just here. It's just south of Carlisle, which is just south of the Scottish border. And so my original plan for this trip was to spend originally, well, it was supposed to be 3 weeks and be 4 weeks in London. Um, and then there's supposed to be 1 week each Penrith and Cambridge, and then 2 weeks on the coast in Portsmouth. But eventually, it got too long of a trip for me, and I quit. I got to cancel the part about going to um, Portsmouth because it's just too late in the year. It's just too long. It's just not going to work out. So, but we spent 1 week each. Came Penrith and Cambridge. Turned out to be 8 days and 6 days because the Queen's funeral was supposed to be on the day I was going to travel. I was advised not to travel that day. Like all the roads and the railroad, everything would be completely booked out. You just couldn't travel very much. So if you delay it one day, so that's what I did. So we're gonna now go to Penrith, and we'll see about that. So as I said, there is a 4-hour train ride to go north along what is it called um, Aventi West Coast, I think it is. And they're usually considered like the worst train service in the UK. They have like multiple train services, and like the railroad tracks are nationalized, but the train service itself is privately run. And Aventi West Coast is like the worst. They have the most delays, the most problems, the most everything is just bad. And then both my going up train and my coming down train, which is both event to West Coast, both of those trains were delayed. Like I had planned to go on, I think it was at 9 o'clock. I ended up going at 10 o'clock going north. I was supposed to take it at 10 o'clock, coming back down again. I took 12 o'clock because the original train was not just delayed, it just didn't come at all. It was just not even existing. um, so yeah, that was a thing. Um, they have ghost trains in the Avanti West Coast. But it was interesting for our ride, going pretty much the length of England, and so we will see some of that now. No, Cal, I actually don't drink at all, but yes, I'm doing that. Um, we did. I will say we did visit Scotland. We'll come to that later. But um, so we'll come to our first slides. Um, so here's some of the Avanti West Coast trains. They look very nice, assuming they arrive. I mean, I think it was supposed to be like a 9:32 that somehow turned into 11:02. That's Avanti West Coast for you. Um, Supposed to arrive at such and such a platform at Houston Station, and you wait at the platform, you wait the platform, you wait the platform, and eventually it just sort of disappears, like the leaderboard that says what trains. It never comes. So the next train comes. Okay. Um. Right. So here's the Avanti trains. They're pretty high speed, not really truly high speed, but they're certainly much faster than Amtrak. Um, and they're very nice inside. And all that good stuff. And this is from Houston Station. It's written Houston, but it's pronounced Houston over there. Okay. Which is right next to King's Cross Station. So here we are on a platform. And then we go north through a whole bunch of towns in between. A lot of like mill towns, industrial towns that are now pretty much closed up. And so here's some of the stuff along the way. Through the window, of course, so you have to mind the fact that there's some like dirt on the windows. But this was fascinating to see like Northern England. Um, we even at one point, one town we went to was Wigan. Wigan, if you're familiar with George Orwell's one of his novels, or maybe nonfiction, you call it Down and Out in Wigan Pier, Down and Out in Wigan Pier, and that's one of his not novels. And so we passed through a town of Wigan or Wigan, whatever it's called, which is interesting if you're an Orwell fan like I am. So this is some sort of power station or something, I guess. I don't know. But we passed through all sorts of towns. And there's a lot of little towns with cattle and sheep in them. Welcome back, Nemo. Hopefully you caught some of that. Yes, they are. Not as high tech as the continent. You'll get more if you go into Europe, but it's better than it is here. So some scenes from rural England. We are roughly paralleling the um is it Apennine or I want to say it's the Apennines, but it's or the Pennines. The Pennines, which are like the central mountain that goes to the middle of England, that separates east and west part of England. So you can see some of the Pennines out the window. This part of England is not so flat. Thank you, Callum. Indeed, Callum. Yes, that would be nice, Callum. It is kind of cold and blowy though, and uh, and moist. It's a damp country. We're going north, through northern England, Nemo. I don't know the exact location, but somewhere west of the Pennine Mountains, heading for Penrith. Exactly, Nemo. Would you guys like me to stream like an hour later? Would that be more convenient? It probably is, Nemo. That's approximately near Leeds, I think. So that's kind of like the middle where we're going. So the Peak District, let's look at this again. We're going roughly from here up to here. And Peak District is near Leeds, right about there. You guys can see that. Yeah, so right about, actually near Sheffield. I take that back. So that's about there. Now we're going up to here, down here. You guys can see that. I said I could stream next week, like an hour later, Kella, like 10 p.m. my time, which I guess is maybe 9 p.m. your time, if that would be more convenient for you, especially Nemo. It always seems to be inconvenient for him. Okay, Nemo. Yes, that's a good idea, Nemo. Say hi to Batgirl. She's somewhere around here. Now the mountains are getting higher. Means we're getting closer. Yes, Nemo. Those are sheep in the distance. More sheep. Once you leave London, it's more sheep than people, I think, at that point. And horses. White and black sheep. Now this was some river. I forget which one it is now, but yeah. Um, Unfortunately, I don't remember which river it was, but that was some important river. I think some at this point we probably entered like Lincolnshire, that area, which is just south of Cumbria. Okay, so that's it for the train trip. And we finally arrived at Penrith. And then once you get off the train station, immediately on the other side of the street is Penrith Castle, which we'll come to later, which is the ruins of a it went through many stages of evolution. And its last stage is probably like 16th century, maybe, 15th, 16th century. It was famously a residence of, I think, King Henry II or somebody before he became actually king. Um, and a bunch of other local history. But this is our first castle. We'll have several others in our trip. But and it's right in the middle of town. It's basically like Central Park of Penrith. Um, it's especially interesting and spooky at night. So we'll get there. But once we get to Penrith, we're gonna step off and drop off our bags at Airbnb, and then we're immediately going to come back to the train station and hop on a bus to see our first attraction of the day, which we'll get to momentarily. So here's the ruins of the castle, including a little girl who's climbing the ruins. And a pedestrian. So now we're heading north on the bus. And in England, double-decker buses often go out into the countryside as well as in London itself. And so if you're lucky, you can take um, a double-decker bus from the top, and you can like see the whole world come out for you. It's quite nice. Unlike being like in the back of a tour bus, this is like in the front, and you can see the whole landscape unfold in front of you, often through narrow little country roads and with farms on either side of you or small towns. Oftentimes, trees will come right up against the bus and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, if you ever go in the countryside in England, you have to take one of the double decker. This is just like a normal transportation bus, coach bus. It goes from Penrith to Keswick, which is the main tourist hub within the Lake District National Park. And Penrith is almost like the access point. So a lot of tourists will take this bus. Um, it goes right down. This bus goes right down like the valley that connects the two, and you're going in this steep valley with huge mountains on either side of you, and right, and you're slowly climbing up to Keswick. And you have mist shrouded mountains on either side of you. This district has the highest peaks in England. You can actually look some of them up, but there's like Skiddaw, uh, Blackathra, um, Under Skiddaw, Threkild, um, and a bunch of other mountains. And I remember when I was waiting for the bus, I met a guy with a backpack, and he said he was going to go hike up and camp out in Threkild. It was like his 13th time he'd done this. He's always been doing it. And That was interesting. He was going to take the bus up to a certain point. I told him I was going to Castlereagh. So we were comparing notes about where we were going to end up the day. But he's going to spend like an overnight or the weekend or something on top of that. And so when he finally left and we passed through further up the valley, I thought of him. Must be on one of these mountaintops somewhere up in the mist. Penrith. Now, this part of England sounds very, very Scottish, and the people sound Scottish, and everything feels Scottish in a lot of ways. The accent is very different than it is in London. I did have at times a little bit difficulty understanding them. Um, Mostly not, but that was a couple of times. Um, and the bus sort of wends its way through these little towns up the mountain valley. Those are the mountains way in the background there. And a lot of these country roads are barely wide enough for like one vehicle, but somehow you always manage to squeeze two vehicles going down it. I think only 6 days out of the year, Nemo. That's the joke. It's 3 days in Scotland, but you get 6 days of sunlight in England. Um, once you leave London is like there's sunlight probably 3 or 4 days a week, but in the rest of the country it's sort of Um, this is very typical English weather. Um, I was actually told it was unusually dry when I arrived. Like it's usually, I was told by one of my guides that it usually rains every single day, pretty much. But when I was there, it only rained one day the whole time, in 1 week, which is impressively dry. Um, so yeah, this is very typical with this part of the country. Um, it is this part of the country has a very sense of a very sort of epic landscape to it. Um, there's also like a lot of Norse or Viking names to a lot of um, the points on the map, the place names, and so that gives it even more epic sense to it. Um, well, it's not quite that cold, Cala, but it is. Yeah, in England, the temperature never drops that far. It never goes too high, it never goes too low. It's always kind of in the middle. But it's always wet. It's always gray. It's always raining. But it never freezes. I mean, very rarely, but yeah. Um, Most winters are without snow. You just kind of get slightly colder rain. And then it opens up. The road is going to go right through those mountains. Amazing. And the higher you go, you eventually get up to Keswick. And Keswick is the gateway to the Lake District. We'll visit Keswick later. That, I think, is Ben Clathra, whatever it's called. One of the main mountains. It is supposedly only you can only see the peak of Ben Clathra, which I think is the highest mountain in England, like only a couple days out of the year. Most of the time, it is shrouded by mist. It's that kind of a place. Um, you can ascend the mountains in this part of the world right into the clouds. And, um, we leave Ben Claflin behind and keep on climbing. And finally, we get off the bus in the middle, seemingly, of the countryside, but with a destination in mind. Um, and so we get off the main road and onto a little side road, apparently with another hiker. And we enter the village of Castle Rig, climb a mountain. How solar works in this country, I have no idea. If you look very carefully in this image, towards the top of the mountain, just below the mist line, a bunch of little white dots. And I'll let you guess what those little white dots are. They're the same little dots, white dots that dot the entire English countryside. That's not Castle Rig, by the way. We're not going up that, but we'll see. Lots and lots of little white dots. Those are just the regular clouds, Kala. This landscape literally sort of goes up into the clouds. One of those kind of places. And we ascend more. Where the land rises up to meet the clouds. And just about 30 miles west of here is the coastline. So the clouds, land rise up to meet the clouds, and the land descends down into the sea. All three meet together. Correct. As we go higher, the road gets narrower and the houses disappear. There's the road we came from, down below. Always more sheep, Nemo. Always. Though here's some cattle. Obviously, this is some cows producing cheddar cheese, I guess. So here's the road. Where we came from and where we're going. You can almost see the top from here. You can see some of the mountain in the background. Cathra, a mighty mountain of England. Welcome to Keswick on Derwentwater. Castlereagh is a village within the village of Keswick. Rest your bones on the way to the stones. Foreshadowing. Napping sheep. And finally arrive at Castlereagh Stone Circle. Now, Castlereagh is a stone circle, as it implies, of unknown age, but it's probably something like 4.5 to 5,000 years old. It's on top of a mountain top from which you can see all of the major other mountains in the area. It's probably not there by chance. It's and it's technically above the cloud line. Now today, when we went there, it was unusually, um, you know, cloudless, relatively speaking, for northern England. So we did not have the clouds beneath us, but there is times when you go up this mountain and the clouds are beneath you, and they're beneath all the surrounding peaks. You can be on top of this mountain with the stone circle and be almost surrounded, almost like you're an island in a sea of mist. Um, and the surrounding, land and landscape in the valleys are not visible anymore, and all the houses are beneath you, so you can't see them anymore. And you're almost like in this little island, and there's a couple other major islands around you, and you can see all the main principal mountains from this peak on a good day. And it's probably chosen for exactly that purpose in mind. Of course, there's always sheep, but so I couldn't exactly name all the mountains in the area, but they're all the important ones. These are the tallest, the seven tallest mountains in England or something like that are all visible from up here. And the way the mountain kind of is shaped, you can't see the surrounding valley really well. It's like obscured by the mountainside. And you really are just like isolated up here. It's fascinating. There's no traffic sounds, there's no townspeople, no houses nearby. You really have been transported, 5,000 years into the past in many ways. Um, I mean, I guess there was a stone wall, but you know what I mean. It does look like that. Somebody 5,000 years ago figured out exactly where to put this and put up the effort to drag I don't know how many dozen or 100 tons of stones up this mountain to do exactly this. So it's been there ever since. The entire history of mankind, written history, has transpired, and this has been up there. Everything has ever happened, and this has been up there. Silent witness to it all. Everybody whose name you've ever heard has lived and died entirely with this up this mountain. Obviously, the stones didn't look that way originally. They'd just been so weathered over the millennia. They gained weird shapes over time. We have no idea what it originally looked like. So obviously what I'm trying to suggest here is some of the taller rocks, stones are very clearly aligned with some of the main peaks in this area that surround this. That one is aligned with Ben Gothra. So this part is like a little box of stones that's inset into the main ring. I'm not sure what that's about, but it's like a little square at one side of it. And when you are there, the clouds there, they go over the mountains. They roll over them. They're not static. They're always moving. Sometimes the peak is revealed, and sometimes it's re-obscured again a few minutes later. It's always moving. Thank you, Nemo. Exactly, Nemo. You always have to commune with the stones. Thank you, Calla. As it often does, the clouds break in the late afternoon in this part of the country. It's usually cloudy from about midnight to about 2, 3, maybe 4 in the afternoon. And then they break up into a partly cloudy condition where you can actually see some sky. And this lasts until about 10 or 12 at night. And then the clouds come back. Evening, you get some stars until about midnight. And then the clouds come back. And rinse and repeat every day. And typically, when the clouds break in the late afternoon, mid afternoon, that's when it rains. 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes. Pretty light rain, not very heavy. You don't get soaked very much. And then after it rains, it opens up and you get some late afternoon sunshine. That's why it is about 6 days out of the week. And then the seventh day, it's clouds all day and it just rains a little more heavily. Not really heavily, heavily, but a little more. And and then that's basically standard English, Scottish, British weather. Except, in the summer it's a little warmer, and in winter it's maybe about 20, 30 degrees cooler. But otherwise the weather is about the same. And that's all it is, all the time. So, and as they say, in England you get 6 days of clear skies, and in Scotland you get three, but out of the year. So pick your days carefully. That I think is Threckeld. The guy I met at the bus stop was climbing somewhere up there. He's going to spend the night amongst the clouds. In a future day, we will almost be climbing one of these mountains a little bit. Yeah, not this day, not the next one, but probably the one after, the 14th. You shall see. Well, I think we have to depart at some point. At this point, it is okay. It's 4 in the afternoon. We go back a little bit. This is go back to here. Okay, well, 3:20. Okay. A little bit Cadillac, not a lot. It was not well, yeah, somewhat. There's a lot of it's a national park. We are literally in a national park right now, Gala. Um, so all right, climbing down the mountain. We must return, unfortunately. This, by the way, counts as a clear sky by English standards. It's almost never like an actually blue sky, but this is pretty cloudless. And so when I got back into town, now Penrith is a modestly small town. It's maybe like 5,000 people in there, something like that. But it's like the biggest town in the area. Um, and there isn't a whole lot of dinner choices, to be honest. Where I was staying in my Airbnbs, I had the idea that you could cook for yourself. In practice, when you share a place with somebody else, a roommate, that becomes a little difficult, let's just say. It's difficult to have clean dishes and utensils. It's difficult and pots, the cooking or something. You don't get a whole lot of fridge space. It's a little challenging to cook, so I never really ended up cooking for myself, unfortunately. So you always had to eat out every single day. Um, and a place like Penrith, especially once you leave London, like most of England closes very early. If you're not there by, 6 o'clock, if you can't find a restaurant by like 6 o'clock in the evening, you might go hungry that night, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Most places are going to be closed around 7, 8 o'clock at the latest. Um, and so when I was in Penrith, I ate a couple other places, but I pretty much ate at this Mexican place, the only Mexican place in town, which was interesting. It's very I call English Mexican. So they take all the spice and they take all the flavor out. It's pretty bland. Like it's very English, but yeah, and a very limited menu. But it's better than nothing because most places are closed at this time. Plus, Penrith is a very touristy town, so the places that are still open, you have to have a reservation and to show up at a certain hour. And if you're taking buses and taxis and stuff everywhere. You don't know when you're going to be home. To be honest, you're going to try and be home at a certain time, but you can't guarantee you're going to be there by 7 p.m. Um, you might not. You might be there, might be back in town by 5, cooling your heels for 2 hours, or I might be there by 7:15, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you miss your reservation and you have no dinner. It's a little challenging at times. This is one of the places I would eat at. And there's actually a Chinese restaurant in town, which opened later than almost anywhere else. I think they're open to like 9 o'clock, which is very, very, very late to be open for a restaurant in England. Now in London, of course, there's a lot of places open to 10 to midnight, but not in England. I mean, most places are like 9 in the morning to like 7, 8 o'clock at night. And if you want to be out earlier than that or later than that, well, tough to be you. Um, so I did find this place, which was mid. Okay. So I had some early dinner. It was still a couple hours of daylight left. So this is yeah. Um yes. Your dietary choices get a lot thinner once you leave London, Calla. A lot thinner. Oh really, Calla? That's interesting. Well, only rained one day I was there. So this is like the center of town. You have a little cute little village square kind of thing. It's all little shops and everything. Penrith is very, very, very touristy. It's like really kitsch and touristy. I mean, if the tourist industry ever disappeared in this place, they would be completely cooked. They would have nothing. Keswick especially would have nothing. There'd be nothing in Keswick. But Penrith, like 75% of the economy would disappear. Keswick would be 100%, but this is like 75%. Um, so you have a lot of little overpriced shops and restaurants and stuff like that, and boutiques. It reminds me of some places in like Cape Cod, um, or the outer parts of Long Island, like in the Hamptons and stuff. There's lots of little towns like that. There's like no normal person can afford to shop here, kind of thing. But this is literally the gateway to the largest and oldest national park in the UK, and it's got lots of traffic, a lot of people coming and going. Lots of little um, boutique hotels and B&Bs and all this kind of. It's just very right. Boarding houses and right. Uh, there is like one McDonald's on the edge of town. That's your one concession to like not overpriced stuff. Um, but yeah, it's this little town square. Um, and this is like 6 in the evening, and most shops are closed at this point. The whole town is shut down at this point. It's sunset is until like 8 o'clock at night. We still have several hours of sunlight left, but most town is closed up by now. In the U.S., most of these places would be open like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Not in this country, maybe. Now, these places close at 5 or 6. Um, um, and there is some bigger box stores and even some industry actually on the outskirts of town, but in a little tourist trap town in the middle, in the center of town, it's not like that. Um, so what was I gonna say? After dinner, I wandered around a little bit downtown while there was still some daylight, and this is very Keswick. And there's like three main roads that converge in town, in the middle of town, and and they lead all other places in the country, but um, so it's really just those three main roads, and there's little alleyways branching off all over the place. Like this Titterington Holidays. You can see a little alleyway. Yeah, that's like an alleyway that leads behind the building into a little courtyard back there. And there's a whole bunch of other little buildings back there. Um, And there's also little alleyways like that throughout this town. And you can kind of see at the top of the road, there's like a building and there's a little alleyway goes back into the courtyard. That's how this town is organized. Um, and you have a little fox door knocker in somebody's door. And here's one of those little alleyways. The gate is probably open by like 5 o'clock. And there's a couple shops there, but not after 5 o'clock. And here's the local church, made from the local brownstone. And lots of little buildings like this. RB 1562, 63, or is that 19? I cannot read that tell. It could be 1563, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like the kind of decoration they would have in the 16th century, though, so maybe it's 19 or 1863 or I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was 1563 in this part of the country. I see. Okay, Callum. What are you guys talking about? Door County, Wisconsin. To go up there about once a year. That's interesting. Nemo? Yes, that's exactly what it is, Nemo. And it's all overpriced. It's all like double price of what it is in like normal places. St. Andrews, appropriately named. And of course, St. Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland, so eh, you're kind of edging in a certain place here. Just 20 miles south of the Scots border. The George Hotel. The Rotary Club of Penrith meets here. There's a lot of little small hotels in town with like a pub on the first floor and all that kind of stuff. But if you need reservations to eat there in a place like that because they're packed. El Cortijo. Well, that's interesting. Well, here's something interesting, guys. Let's see if we can switch over. So that Corito, or is it Cortio, is right in here. Penrith and Eden Museum. That's interesting. Eden is the local river in this part. Villa Bianca Hotel. It's interesting. So if we go here, you guys can see this. So there's the El Cortillo. And then down here, we apparently have a cinema. Alhambra Cinema Penrith. Two screen. I guess we're on the opposite side of that. And you have some very, very small theaters. That is fascinating. This reminds me when I went to P-Town last summer. That was this little tiny movie theater in like an emporium marketplace. Oh, it was a bigger theater too. Okay. Yes, this reminded me of that place. I looked in the window and there's a ticket attendant, and you go up these little stairs, and it was a really small theater. Yeah, it had to be to fit into the space. Man, okay, that's fascinating. So how do you, and Middlegate Road here? Okay, that's interesting. I never noticed that when I was there. That's interesting, Nemo. Here's the town hall. Now, the Penrith Town Hall is actually pretty extensive in its jurisdiction because Penrith, even though it's a little town in the middle, actually the town is not just the little town; it's actually all of the surrounding countryside. And it's actually subdivided into all these little villages and everything, but it's not just a town; it's actually almost like a district. It's quite a large district. I think it's almost as like the size of London. Okay, even though the actual town itself is maybe 5,000 inhabitants, and there's only a couple thousand in the surrounding countryside. It's quite large. Um, so it's interesting. It's almost like a mini county in its own right, in some ways. Um, it's golden hour, and then you have the wishing well. Help Penrith lions to help others. Put a coin in the slot and listen for the bell. So, yep, you'd put a coin in this little slot here, you see in the center, and it kind of wound around. You could kind of hear it go around, and it made an interesting sound as you went down. Thackabeck was Penrith's first water supply, created by Bishop Strickland about the year 1400. An artificial watercourse, the amount of water taken from the river Petrel, about 2 miles north of Penrith, was determined by as much water as would constantly run through the eye of a millstone. This garden was created by Penrith Civic Society, Silver Jubilee year 1977. So that much water to water Penrith. That's a lot of time. So Penrith has some interesting history behind it. For a long time, it was basically uninhabited, or at least there's no real known town in the area. Interestingly enough, there was no known Roman town where Penrith is, even though it stands at the confluence of the two major rivers in northern England. So the largest river in this part of England is the Eden, and then the second largest is the Imond, which and they converge about a mile or two west of center of town, which we'll visit later. Um, and and then there's a valley which runs through the area, and Penrith is the valley that goes north south into Scotland towards Edinburgh and all that, or not Edinburgh, towards Glasgow, from like um, Lincoln and Lincoln, but there's a couple towns further south of here along a Roman road. And there's a Roman road that goes through the area, but there's no town in Penrith that's known to be Roman. And then that converges with the main road, which comes down through the valley from Keswick, and that goes up into the mountains. So you have a major river crossing and then a major road crossing, and so you'd think there'd be a town there, but apparently not. And and then sometime in the certainly after the Norman conquest, um, there was well at the Norman conquest basically there was already some monasteries in the area up amongst the mountains basically, and pretty much based upon Norman conquest, they gained a lot of land, and the Normans and the French in general had developed an economy based upon sheep farming, and they would use very large tracts of land under consolidated monasteries to herd sheep for wool production. And one of the consequences of Norman conquest was the sheepification, if you will, of England. Previously, it had a lot of dispersed subsistence farmers, and they sort of commercialized a lot of the country into it's almost like a wool production center or export. Um, and the area around Penrith was one of the, because it was sparsely populated, I guess, was one of the major areas of development of sheep production or of wool production. And those were concentrated in the monasteries of Furness, which I find fascinating. Call it um, the Furness Abbey, and there's another abbey um, whose name escapes me, and they sort of divided almost the entire area between themselves. And where they met was Penrith, and their common sort of wool market grew up along this road junction that became Penrith. Um, and but it was between their territories, neither of them developed a town in the area. Neither of them wanted to develop a town in the area. They didn't want to attract population because that would require food, and that would take away from the wool production, so they didn't want that. But those two abbeys became like two of the largest, richest, most economically productive institutions in all of England at one point during the late Middle Ages and into the Tudor period. Um, and they owned, you know, the better part of all the land for miles and miles and miles around. I think both abbeys owned something on the order of like, um, I don't know, 500,000 acres or something with some tremendous estates. And they were sometimes actually at war with each other, trying to battle over this or that valley for economic exploitation purposes. It was just crazy how you have like actual, monastic abbeys would sort of almost sick um, brigands and mercenaries on each other in order to grab some territory for sheep. Um, but then the local missionary sort of tried to develop a town, tried to put the peace with each other and all this kind of stuff. It was right. Um, and so there's that part of Penrith history. Another part of Penrith history is that supposedly um, King, I think it was Ethelred or somebody, who was the immediate father, who's King Alfred the Great's father, who was the very first king of England, or maybe king in England. That's all another. He tried to he made himself king of England, and then he tried to um, form a meeting that was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of Penrith. Nobody knows exactly where, because it was really a town. But they met. He called a meeting with the Prince of Wales and the King of Scotland, and he tried to organize them ostensibly against like the Viking menace. That they should have formed a common front with each other to fight the Vikings that were raiding them, and under his under his leadership, of course, and that and they didn't really take to this because it sounded a little too much like the taking over their kingdoms. But that happened. That first attempt to form like a united Britain, united British Isle, happened somewhere in this area in the late 700s. Um, so you can almost imagine them meeting on the banks of the River Eden. Um, meet me at this date where the Eden meets the um, Iman, and we will discuss how to deal with this problem. You can almost imagine these great kings from all the places with all their entourage and all their armies. They meet in one location, and they try to meet to form an alliance. And through mutual suspicion, they broke up without forming an alliance. Um, and they broke up and never happened again for another 1,000 years, basically until the United Kingdom formed in like 1800, right? So for 1,000 years, they tried right here. Um, it's just sort of interesting to think about. But and all of it in the shadow of Castlereagh, and we'll learn later on in the shadow of Long Meg. Like on either side of you, these extremely ancient, even by then, they're already 3,000 years old, stone circles. Probably everybody knew they were somewhere out in the countryside, but both these locations, 10 miles out in either direction, not that far. But all these great kings met in the middle and then dispersed. And so something happened in this area long ago. Um, but anyway, it's a little Penrith history there. So here's one of those little alleys that lead off the main road. This might have been the one that led to the Chinese restaurant I attended, probably like 3 nights out of 7 or 8. Yeah, like these little alleys that go through the back. Variety Home wants to sell you Penrith real estate. Have a country house in the middle of a national park. Okay. There's lots of little things like this where it's like, you know, tiny little sliver house, and there's somebody on the ground floor. There's a narrow, rickety little stairs that go to the second floor for a second unit. And there's a third unit with an even rickier looking stairs going up onto the third level. And this is very, very, very typical of Penrith. Down this narrow little alleyway, which is, barely wider than your shoulders. About half town looks like this. And then a lot of the town, as I said, was either the main roads and these narrow alleyways lead to like little courtyards in the back. And those little courtyards were actually like markets for various goods, mostly for wool, of course, to sell the wool, but then they would buy various goods from traveling merchants. Um, and that's what these courtyards start off as, like enclosed markets. White Hart Yard. Though this archway was the old Hart Inn, through this archway was the old White Hart Inn. Recorded in 1720, a noted coaching inn from the beginning of the 19th century. 1922, William Kerr, a well-known um, nurse nurseryman, that was he had like you know he basically had a garden, like a nursery for trees and um, you know gardening plants, and flowers. Bought the property and gave the facade a complete facelift. Here, the Penrith Players, founded in 1922 by Horace Page, the new manager of Barclays Bank, staged their first production of a comedy, Uncle Ned. In 1935, they won the northern section of the British Drama Week Festival. Players moved from premises on Castlegate into inverted furniture auction rooms 1998, with a first production of the musical Annie. To the right of White Hart Lane was the Griffin Inn, demolished 1890s. Landlord here, until his death in 1888, was the retired wrestling champion William Jameson, whose large collection of trophies can be seen in Penrith Museum. In 1867, the Pall Mall Gazette referred to a certain gigantic Jameson of Penrith, who was more like a polar bear on its hind legs in a gray flannel shirt than a human being. The Griffin was the mecca to which wrestlers, athletes, and sportsmen of all kinds made their way when in Penrith. Napoleonic times saw excitement and feverish activity, with 8 companies of volunteers called the Loyal Leith Ward Volunteers Regiment, commanded by John the Whelpdale of Bishop Yards. The volunteers were offered a bounty of 2 guineas, or £4, which is a lot of money that I have, to join the militia, which served until the establishment of peace after Waterloo. Here, over the centuries, was a hive of noisy bustle, full of people, horses, stables, with lifts and hoists above, carriages, carts, trading in corn, wool, and produce, a blacksmith, a brewery, a milking machine business, and an early base of Penrith Mountain Rescue to the rear. Clint Mill, um, through White Hart Yard, was built in 1878 for Pattinson and Winter, seed merchants and millers, dealing in all kinds of provin. They had 2 shops, the Busk and the Margaret, plying between Liverpool and Whitehaven, which is the main city on the coast. Once the third port of Britain. It was indeed. At one point, Whitehaven, which is only about 30 miles west of Penrith on the coast, was one of the largest cities in England, and the largest um, um, coal ports in the world. They export coal all over the world, by tonnage the largest. Where they own the Beacon Mill. Clint Mill became Nickerson's seed merchants for much of the 20th century, in the early 1990s being converted into offices and a gymnasium. The new White Hart Yard scheme is an environmentally sympathetic development by Eden Housing Association, who are kindly sponsoring this plaque for Penrith Millennium Trail. Bought in 2000 with Griffin Yard, um, grant funded by Eden District Council. There are 12 homes for local people. Griffin Yard, landlocked for years, has been opened. The yard is Grade 2 listed, and sympathetic conservation salvages and reuses original materials. Stone runnels and tracks, carts, and stagecoaches are um, reinstated. Nemo. And here's the castle. Ulswater and Keswick along the M6, which is the main surface level highway in this part of England. And Morrison's is one of the main supermarket chains, and they also have gas stations and stuff like that. And this is like on the outer part of town. Cute little downtown, and then there's some bigger shops and even like factories or something. I don't know, warehouses on the outside of town. Morrison's. Now I had a lot of breakfast at Morrison's because they opened up earlier than usual. Most places open up like 8, 9 o'clock. They open up at 7, so you get there at 7 as soon as they open. I get be out there by 8 o'clock and try to catch a bus or something somewhere in the region, or catch a taxi at 8 o'clock, and it'd be somewhere by 9 o'clock, and then you could right from 9 o'clock until maybe like 5. You could go out for the day, and then by 5 o'clock you could be back in town by like 6. So before some place close by 7, you know what I'm saying? It's like right, that was your schedule. So and you catch up someplace before 7, so you get back to your Airbnb at 8 o'clock. You get back to bed by 10 o'clock, and you're up again the next day at 6 to be at Morrison's by 7. Yeah. Um, Welcome to Castleton, Norfolk Road. So Castleton was the kind of neighborhood where I was staying in. Lots of little row houses everywhere. And here's one of my better, maybe not better pictures, but from um, top of Castlereagh. So that'll be all for tonight, guys. If anybody has any questions, I will wrap. Yeah, if you want to get somewhere anywhere, by on foot and on bus, you gotta get up early. Um, there's no spare time. Let's put it that way. There's no downtime at the end of the day. You just get home, you shower, and you hit the hay. You hit the. That's it. You're ready for the next day. Thank you, Cal. Tomorrow we'll visit a lake and a mountain and a waterfall. Or next week. So, all right, guys. See you next time.